the market has a way of straightening us out. Well, you can even read about that. There are lots of great books that say this precisely. But until you've been at least a little humbled, I don't know that it'll ever stick.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm excited to have with you today a gentleman who is truly multidimensional and is going to talk with us about taking dead aim, creating niche marketing and a niche focus in your business to help you really help more people make more money in less time doing what you do best, as we always talk about. Scott is the founder and CEO of Doubledare, an executive coaching practice. He's a licensed mental health therapist. He's founded a nonprofit. He's done a lot of different work. I'm going to let you read the bio more in the notes, but I'm so excited to have him with him here today. And thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So one of the things that really intrigued me about when I saw your information, and for those who don't know, people say, "Hey, I'd like to be on your show" or whatnot. And I was looking at what Scott's doing. Wow. In fact, I might have even reached out to you. I forget, but so much of what you're doing, I thought, was so powerful around not only helping people address change, not only helping people with the project you have that helps wounded warriors, PTSD, that sort of focus, but just this idea of understanding that there's this sort of integration between sort of the intangible, the mental, the abstract, the ethereal to some people, and the tangible. A lot of people, when you talk about niching, it seems very mechanical. And then if you say things like "do what you love," then it sounds very woo-woo and kind of out. How do you bring those two together, and share a little bit, if you don't mind, about what it means to you to when somebody says to you,
Sure.
taking that aim, what does that mean?
Well, it's such a great question. Wow, I'm going to have to think about that. The expression "taking dead aim" comes from a golf coach, actually, the late great Harvey Penick, who wrote a book called The Little Red Book of Golf. And he was a golf coach for University of Texas, I believe. And he wrote this book that was meant to be sort of a straightforward golf book, but it became famous because so much of it had wisdom beyond the golf course, and kind of married the two things you just mentioned, sort of woo-woo and ethereal and imminently practical. And but a lot of what he was talking about was exactly that, the nexus between practical execution, concrete blocking and tackling, et cetera, and mindset. So the concept specifically that Penick had around take that aim was instead of when you tee off, instead of aiming for the middle of the fairway, aim for a blade of grass in the middle of the fairway. And his belief was that if you did that, first of all, it would relax you to focus on one thing, but it would also allow mind, body, spirit to do what it does naturally. If you can focus on one thing and very, very precisely one thing versus a million things, the 10,000 things, as Buddha said. And so I love that expression because what I've noticed, not just in niching, but in everything that I do and so many of my clients do, is that we tend to, instead of taking dead aim, take a scattergun approach to so many things that we do, mainly just to put out the fire. We come up with something that will just sort of make the problem go away temporarily. Whereas when we take dead aim to solve very, very specific things, it really does harness and engage mind, body, and spirit. So for example, I'm working with a client today that owns an advertising agency in Oakland, California. And what we're going to be talking about, what I'm asking them to do, is to take dead aim on their sales goal, their revenue goal, and their net profit goal. And to do that, what they've said is they wanted to triple profit and double net income. But I'm forcing them to come up with a specific number for both of them because it really does engage mind, body, spirit, and it becomes real suddenly. And it's much more difficult to measure our progress against tripling and doubling than it is against a specific number. So that's the concept behind it. And the reason I like it is because it answers just what your question said. is how do you create this nexus between mind, body, spirit, mindfulness, woo-woo sounding ethereal ideas with very, very practical ones.
Awesome. I think of a couple things. I think of when you're doing a yoga pose that's a balance pose, they talk about finding, I think the word is drikta, a point. You focus on one point because normally you think,
Right.
okay, I'm going to look around me and make sure I'm balanced. And you do that, you're just going down. And I even think of a video series, the masterclass series. We invested in that, and we were watching Steph Curry, the shooter or the
Sure.
point guard from the
Yeah.
Golden State Warriors, teaching shooting. And he talks about the little on a basketball hoop, the little hooks that hold the net. He says, look, no matter where you are, there's going to be 3 of those. Find the middle one, you aim for that one. Very similar concept. And
Right.
I've never really been coached in basketball, so I was helping my son do this. And yet I started doing this. And one of the other things in basketball or any sport, if you meet beginning soccer players, they dribble like this. They're looking at the ball. They basketball players, they're dribbling like this. And I'll tell the kids, there's nobody that's open down there. They're open. They're out there. But so I was
Good
listening
point.
to this thing, and I'm just sitting here, and I'm watching now, and I'm shooting like this. And then normally I look at my hands when I shoot, but I'm just doing this. And I guess so much of it was just letting go of those 10,000 things, all the different things I could get obsessed with. And of course, if you've not done this, it's not going to work. So sometimes people say, well, do you have self-esteem? I said, yeah, I have self-esteem, but I also have performance esteem. As a coach, I feel very confident in that. If you ask me to be a brain surgeon, my confidence level is at about a 0, rightfully so. It doesn't mean I feel less of myself. It means I don't know how to do brain surgery. So obviously there's work involved, but I think a lot of people try to do that thing of being all things to all people because it
Yes.
feels safer. The same way when I'm teaching kids to shoot a basketball, that it feels safer to think of all 10 things they're supposed to. It's like, okay. And as a coach, if they're, especially like in a game, they're at a free throw line, they miss a free throw. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the one thing? And usually with these kids, it's okay, put more arc on it. And that's the only thing is if I say
Exactly.
3 things to them, they can't do that. How does that get in people's way of maybe being fearful or trying to do too many things? And how does that, in a very practical sense, hurt
Yes.
people, make them unproductive, and work more than they need to, or maybe even
Exactly.
miss out on opportunity?
Yeah, exactly. And this is something I certainly learned myself, having been an entrepreneur for a long time and started 9 different companies. One of the things I know about myself and about most entrepreneurs is that we're imminently distractible by shiny objects and ideas. Period. Bad ones, good ones, mediocre ones, and that's a good thing, but it's a blessing and a curse. And so what tends to happen is that we lose interest. Entrepreneurs lose interest. If you can think of it from a golf standpoint, it's like taking and you're standing at the tee and you take the club back to hit the ball, and you sort of lose interest, midway in your backswing, and you think, what I really need is a new car or whatever, and this is what happens, sadly, and it certainly has happened to me a lot, and has happened to my clients. And so, our troubles, we think are of our own making, as a friend of mine says. The problems that that the economy offers, or COVID even offers, are nothing compared to the problems that I unleash on myself by not being single-minded. So, also to the point of confidence, one of the reasons that most people lose confidence is because they're trying to do something impossible, which is to hold 10 ideas at the same time and to execute 10 ideas at the same time. Whereas if we do focus and do take dead aim, whether it's on solving the problem of how do we break through plateaued sales, to be very, very practical, a problem a lot of my clients face. Their business takes off, they hit the 5-year mark, for some reason, sales plateau. They don't know why. And often it's because they're doing too many things at the same time, and they're not doing enough of the essential things that will take them past the plateau very quickly. But it means letting go and shedding, as I like to say, the things that aren't essential to taking them farther. And so at first, to your question earlier about, isn't niching kind of scary because you forego the idea is if I'm everything to everybody, then no one can say no. The problem is no one can say yes either. And that's the point that most of us forget, is that when we mean nothing to anyone, no one's going to say yes. And everybody who is taking dead aim at contractors or insurance agents or whatever are going to win every time. So it is sort of a leap of faith, though, particularly for entrepreneurs who are mainly focused on survival to begin with, not really success. And but on the other hand, it's transformative once you begin to really focus on a particular person, take dead aim on a particular problem. Things really begin to shift.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I've learned over the years, so I've been an entrepreneur a little over 20 years now. And one of the things that I notice is I sometimes get caught looking at other people's business models and then I question mine and I start changing mine. It's like, oh, well, that looks good.
Yeah,
And they're in their lane doing their thing. And I'm actually in my lane doing my thing, but the bored, distractible thing. So I want to do what they're doing. And there's this fine line between being open-minded, being willing to learn, which, normally can be a good thing, and being so influenceable. I remember I was at a workshop once of a online marketing program, and I was maybe about 5-6 years into my software business, which was a very specific thing. I was going to be a coach and a sales coach and executive coach. I started doing that and was doing okay. And one client said, Wade, we need to compensate our team members better and we need a software that'll do it quickly. And I focused on that for about 5-6 years.
exactly.
Income goes through the roof compared to what I'd been doing.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, I'm at this online marketing thing. So I want to expand my market. Again, I wanted to get out of my niche that loved me, knows me. Again, got a little bored, a little distracted, want to go bigger.
Yeah.
So I'm at this workshop, and a lot of it had to do with launching new businesses, and launching anything new takes a lot of energy, and there's a lot of stress, and it's like trying to go for a grand slam home run as opposed to base hits. It's trying to make a lot happen. And somewhere in all of this, as I'm fanboying to the people that are there, one of the guys pulls me aside. He says, Wade, tell me something. He said, you told me you're making X amount, it was over 6 figures, with your software business, that you're working about 30 hours a week and you don't have this crazy stuff. He says, Wade, just so you know, other than the one or two, those 2 or 3 people over there, you're doing better than all the rest of us. And it literally took about 10 years for that to sink in. Literally, because he's not successful. Oh, okay, poor him. And really what it was is I have this niche and still have them.
Yeah.
That I understand very well. And yes, it allows me to take that wisdom to other people. And I still want to do that because I'm not done growing. But I find, and my wife gets so tired of hearing this, every time, like, when I really help those insurance agency owners that I've worked with in that business for 35 years, gosh, they really appreciate me. I really do great work for them. And they pay me really well. And they do awesome. Like, wait, I made like 10 times what I paid you.
Yeah.
Wow. And yet the insecurity, even to your point of, well, where's the insurance industry going? And what if self-driving cars, like all these things. And if that trickles to them, like all these thoughts. And it's like, dude, you're okay. And again, I think so much of that, you and I talked a little bit about this, about having this small business or smallish business, a business that feels like it's not big enough. How do you help people look at, or what's actually, let me start here. What's the best practice for a person to start thinking, what is that niche? In other words, because some people say a niche is, well, parents. Well, there's a lot of parents on the planet. They might say parents. Yeah. How does a person know if they have truly a niche, or they just have sort of a demographic or a classification of people?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because you're right. I mean, how many parents are there? Presumably there's billions and billions of parents worldwide, and not quite narrow enough. It's so funny. I'm going through a similar our niching exercise, take dead aim exercise with one of my clients later today, and what we're going to talk about to begin with is to have them talk to me anecdotally about clients that they have worked with. And the ones where everybody felt like this was an incredible deal, where the client felt like, just as you said with your clients who 10x the money that they pay you, there's scenarios of that kind where where my client felt overpaid, where the client felt like they underpaid, where everybody felt really happy, where they send each other Christmas cards, kind of the brass ring. And I want them to talk about that, because there is a lot of wisdom there, and kind of speaks to, you've seen this, I'm sure. So many of my clients, this is sort of the definition of imposter syndrome: is you get really, really good at something, and you sort of, it feels too easy, and you wonder why you're charging such high prices. And it's imposter syndrome. And yet, for you, it's easy. It's just like for the brain surgeon, it's easy. I'm sure it's easy for them, but for our clients, it's impossible. So that's what I'm really looking for, is that magical moment where my clients are serving their customers in a way that is almost magical. And almost always, and I've already talked to this client about a couple of instances, there are 4 or 5, maybe 10 cases, depending on the age of the business, where they can point to customers they'd like to clone. And more than customers, it's experiences I want to clone. And both for my clients and what they do, but also for their customer. And that's usually really good breadcrumbs. You can really trust that. The more you can become really analytical, to a fault, I think. But mainly, it's how did everybody feel? And if customers say, "Boy, you hit the ball out of the park. You 10x my expectations. Plus, I love you and it was fun." Let's do a lot more of that, whatever that is. And you can call it a niche or call it whatever you want, but basically what we're trying to do is to recreate an experience that everybody loves. So that's what we work on. That's how we sort of begin to focus on it. And that works really well, actually.
That's awesome. And you just hit something. It's funny how things work. I've heard about imposter syndrome for 12 years. I've denied it for 12 years. And literally about a day ago, I realized, wow, because exactly what you're saying, and this might resonate with some people. So I'm one of those people. Okay. So I was raised Catholic, and my mom tells a story about one day we came home from elementary school, my cousin and we both get in, and we get picked up by one of the parents. We both get in, and my aunt asks her daughter, "How's how was school?" "It was great." "Wait, how was it?" "Oh my God, did you hear what they did to Jesus? They nailed him to a cross. It was horrible." Like I internalized this so much that I couldn't pass this.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to charging people, I'm very aware of the financial strata in the world. I'm aware that 6 out of 7 people on the planet live on less than $32 a day.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing multi-thousand dollar coaching contracts,
Exactly.
that's something to me that I'm very sensitive about. Okay, I've got to make sure I'm giving well. I definitely have that. I got to be careful that I don't think, oh my gosh, people make a lot of money, they've got to be bad people. No, they don't. Like I have that, and I come from a family that's done well, and I so believe in the affluence, the circulation of money and value. And you watch people that have done that. It's awesome. But it's funny. I have this thing of, these are some of my people that just love what we've done together, those magical sort of situations. And like you said, want to clone the relationships, the quality of them. And yet somewhere in there comes that voice for me with the niching of, okay, maybe I've already charged them enough now. Like as if there's some amount in the lifetime that I'm supposed to charge them. And yet again, and I'm literally working this through as you're.
Yes. Yeah.
But if they 10x'd it, why would I stop that game? And, or if they even had a friend, and that's the part that for me has been exciting, when I'd say, okay, can I go one off, not 10 degrees to the right or the left, but 1 degree to the right? And then, okay, well then what's that next thing they have? And that's where niching has been very powerful for me, because it would sometimes feel like, well, what if I run out of these people? In my case, there's a very specific company I work with, and a lot of them, there are a finite number of people that have that position. So part of me gets a little fearful and think, well, hold on, but they might have a second issue. I don't know. People might have more than one issue that they could use help.
It's worth finding out. Sure.
Yeah. And so that's been exciting to then, for that same group, help the same group with another issue, not just the software. In this case, it was recruiting or sales coaching.
Exactly.
What's a practical way for a person who's maybe caught in this time trap of they're trying to do, they're putting 10% of their effort into 10 things, and they're trying to at least get down to, I don't know, 2, 3 things. What's a practical way for somebody to look at their business and say, okay, this is working, this is not working, and maybe more importantly, I might have to get to this later. I'm not giving up on it, but maybe
Yeah,
I'm going to get to it later because right now it's not working and I still need to pay the bills and be the provider for my family, whatever it is.
exactly.
How do you help people get through that? And what's some wisdom around that?
Well, yeah, boy, that is such a common problem. And I've been through it all my life. I have to confess. I've been like you, I'm a lifelong entrepreneur and run into that a lot. And yeah, it requires a lot of discipline. I mean, for people who are truly entrepreneurs, to kind of put all their eggs in 3 baskets even is a huge bet, you know. And because we're capable, and this is the other problem with being an entrepreneur, is that we're capable of, a lot of us, of doing a lot of things pretty well. Um, you know, I guess the main thing, failure is kind of the best teacher, I think. If we're taking dead aim at what we really, really want in our lives, and I want to go back to something you said at the beginning of the conversation that's so right, is that you could have your life, your life may only be 1 degree away from where you want it to be. If we stop comparing ourselves to other people, we'd realize, boy, I'm working 30 hours a week, I'm making, 6 figures. Really, how much farther does this need to go? I mean, really, truly, for me to be happy and comfortable and so on and so forth. So again, it comes back, I think, to taking dead aim. I mean, what do you really want? Unfortunately, for most entrepreneurs who don't decide, well, this is what I'm after. This is the, and we never get perfect, but just generally, these are the things that I want with respect to lifestyle, income, charity, community, etc. And once we take it dead aim at that, then we kind of know where we're going and we can make better decisions. But for most entrepreneurs, motivated both by ambition and by terror, there's no goal. You'll never get there. The goalposts keep moving. Or there actually aren't any goalposts. It's just further, more, work harder, etc. So a lot of it has to do, I think, with starting with, look, this is what I'm trying to do. And then you can make a decision that's a bit more rational around, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. So, and therefore, here are my options to get there. Because otherwise we're sort of doomed to, if we run into a bit of a wall, not a brick one, maybe a paper one, we're apt to say, oh, this model doesn't work, ditch it, and so forth. So again, the concept of kind of deciding where you really want to go is something that's hard for a lot of entrepreneurs to do, surprisingly, and particularly hard to choose what are the 2 or 3 baskets I'm going to put my eggs in. Really hard. And yet I've seen it pay off over and over and over. And just as it had for your business, where all of a sudden it really takes off by making that commitment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've at times tried to explain to my children to keep it simple is just say, look, if you focus on 10 things over 50 years, you're going to get 5 years worth of work in each of them. And if you focus on 5 things, you're going to get 10 years. You're going to be better. If you focus on 2 things, that's 25 years. So of course, then the next question becomes, okay, but wait, what are those things? And so there's that nervousness around that. But something you said I want to jump back into about, not having a sense of where people are looking to go. One of the things that I've found, I share, a background in mental health counseling or psychology, that area. And when I was working on my practicum, I got to meet a lot of different people. And I thought most of the psychology would be in the runaway homeless shelter where I was volunteering, not in my clients. And a lot of what would keep coming back up for me was the software I have helps compensate business owners, team members. And very often one of the main goals is, how much money you want to make. And the answer that always raises an eyebrow for me is as much as I can. Without being judgmental, that is of the quality of the addict. That is, there will never be enough. I just need more.
Well said. Boy, that's a great insight.
what would that mean to you? I don't even know what it means to me. I just need more. And you say, well, okay, I've seen people that want more and more. I mean, there's countless movies, books, written
Sure.
about that, as opposed to, well, if I had this amount, it would be worth this to me. And I recently got reminded of a study that was done a while ago where at least in US dollars, about $65,000 a year. Once you get over that, it almost goes off a cliff as far as increases in, satisfaction with income and work and life and happiness. And that's self-report. It's not, it's the people
Yeah.
saying, yeah, the people at a lower amount, yeah, I want to get there. But once it hits 65,000, you think so many people in our country that are looking to hit, 10 times that, 100 times that, and thinking that if and when I get there, then that will be, that'll be happy. Then I'll be happy. Then it'll be worth it. And they seem to be taking such big risks, being everything to all people. Like you said, I love that. If you're everybody, then you're really nothing to nobody.
Yeah.
How do you minimize that risk then? Because it seems like the smaller risk is to be everything. It seems like
Yeah.
if you have a website, to say, everybody come to my website. I've got a coaching program, I've got whatever it is, it's for everybody. And yet, even if you watch something as simple as Gatorade or soccer balls, they niche their advertising. They might not change the product, but
Yeah.
they certainly niche their advertising to the
Absolutely.
people they're talking to. How can people make that more practical and doable so they're not having to do 50 things, but they're figuring
Yeah.
out, where to put that?
A couple of things, and fortunately, the market tells us that the cost of trying to be everything to everyone. And on a very practical level, if you look at your website, let's assume that you're doing great SEO and you've got Google ads or whatnot, AdRoll, running ads to your site or traffic to your site. So that's good. Let's say we're doing well from a Google standpoint and we're getting good traffic. If you find, and I've had this happen a couple of times. In fact, I'm just launching a new site now, and it's not quite there because what I've noticed is that the visits are not long enough, as compared with where I know they need to be. And I'm convinced that the reason is that we're not being specific enough. And so, this is the problem. You can drive a lot of people to a website, just as a very practical example. But if they aren't converting by requesting appointments or opting in for your information, then you're really wasting money. And that, I find, is the biggest cost of being everything to everyone, is that you may be able to generate someone to visit your site once, but not twice. And also their visit will be very low quality and very brief. That's the problem on at a practical level. I ran an advertising agency for 25 years, and for the first 10, we tried to be all things to all people. And our niche, if anything, was that we had very popular and very well-known creative. So it was sort of a horizontal niche. And that was okay for a while, but there's always another hot agency that also has hot creative, and it's very subjective anyway. And our sales plateaued, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was because we meant nothing to nobody. If you wanted a very unique, and of course our creative was only valuable in the eye of the beholder. We didn't have a specific reason for people to say yes. And so it took a long time of hitting my head against the wall, wondering why sales are plateauing. And we finally realized, the people who were really winning in our industry were people that were niching, that were solving very specific problems for very specific customers. And what happened to them was not only did they go out of business because they had too few clients, the reverse happened. All of a sudden they became, when people hit their website, if they were the right people, they engaged, they requested appointments, they scheduled calls, they downloaded information, they joined the Facebook website or Facebook page, and so on and so forth. Plus, and this is the most important part, I'm sure you've seen this, Wade, if anybody has, is that your clients, all of us, because you are now totally differentiated, and because you can really point to the ROI that you can deliver for your clients, you can charge more. You're not commodity anymore. You're now totally differentiated. Plus, clients can really see, based on testimonials and other past history, that you do 10x their investment. And any entrepreneur with their salt who can 10x, can spend $1 and get 10 back, is going to do that all day long. And then it becomes really, as you know, I mean, then it not only becomes very profitable, you break through the sales plateau, but more importantly, you break through the profit plateau. And also the quality of your life changes dramatically, because now you're coming to people not begging for business as a commodity, but auditioning clients to see whether you have time for them, whether it's a fit or not. And you have great confidence that you are in fact the brain surgeon, and that what you're selling is something that nobody else can do. And it just feels so much better to be a specialist offering bona fide value than to be a commodity salesman who has goats for sale, basically. Wouldn't you like some nice goats?
Well, it's funny you say something there, and something just connected for me. Well, yeah, and because in my mind, well, brain surgeon's better than what I do. Well, no, if somebody needs what I do, no, a brain surgeon's not better. Brain surgeon can't help them. I think that's something we
Exactly.
forget. Again, I think, and again, I've done so much inner work and a master's degree, and I'm a certified coach, and all these different things, and I've done a lot of the work, and it reminds me of the movie with was it Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, The Devil's Advocate, and there's the
Hmm.
end part where he gets right back in the loop. And I don't want to say too much because it's an awesome movie. If you've seen it, you know
Yes,
what I'm
yeah,
talking about. If you don't,
yeah,
and you're like, just when he thought he'd gotten through all of that, and he's like right back, and it's like you do this work. And I think definitely the clients that I've worked with, there's also a different level of depth. So a couple things, and this is where if you need in more woo language, you'd say better relationships. In more left brain language, you'd say lifetime value of a customer. A
yeah,
lot of those people whose pictures held up, I've worked with for 20 years.
right.
And there have been years in my software business where we've not made a lot of improvements. We've not done a lot of I could even look back and say, yeah, you didn't really do much. But number one, the relationship had been there. Number two, if it keeps delivering, then that's not a problem, because part of me would say, well, I have to
Exactly.
do something more. And
Yeah.
maybe I don't. But the other thing is, I just think about it in different stages of the difference between, let's say, the stage of our lives, if you've done this, where you're dating a lot of people and you're going on a lot of first dates, and it's the same experience over and over again. And then if and when you get engaged, get married, have kids, you probably don't do that with 200 people. But there's a depth of experience in things that you'll never get. You can go on 1,000 dates, first dates,
Yeah.
and you'll never get there. And that's that level of also understanding your niche to a certain degree, even to where, in my case, with a mental health counseling background, it's like, okay, I don't want to go. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to go too far into this, because then you start knowing more stuff. Like, okay, I don't really go there.
Yeah.
But even the simple fact that you're wearing, you could refer people to, hey, read this book or whatever it is. But I just think more and more about, again, I've heard so often this concept, the avatar, your ideal client, the person who, you would love to have you help them, or you'd love to have as your client. And, or, if you could have 1,000 people in a room and you were pitching something, who would those people be? Like, describe that person. And of
Yeah.
course, usually it's what's now being called a psychographic. It's not, they're
Yeah.
a certain color or a certain gender or a certain age. It's, oh, they have this mindset. They have this
Exactly.
aspiration. They have something in common. How do you know? There's that quote, you and I talked about it. I think it's Jay Abrams, understanding, when you can understand and articulate your customers' pain points greater than they can, they'll believe that you can help them, that you have the answer.
Yes.
What does that look like in real? Because I've heard that, and maybe people listening to this have heard that. What do you see that looks like, or how does a person know when they're doing that they really have that sense, not in the manipulative sense of, hey, well, I just stole your words and I'm regurgitating them back to you,
Right.
but I truly understand what it is and where you're at, and then that gets communicated in such a way it's like, oh yeah, okay, you can help me.
Yeah. It's funny, and for some reason in business, sometimes in small business and entrepreneurial business, it's almost counterintuitive. It's like, I have this solution, or in my early advertising days, I love to produce television commercials that are funny and clever and memorable. And so I'm going to try to. That's what I'm going to do. So let me try to find somebody who will give me money so I can do that. And just a trifle myopic and self-centered. And you wonder why sales plateaued. But that was sort of my idea, right? And but it's surprising and I don't cast aspersions since I am guilty of this, but it's amazing how many entrepreneurs go to market with that in mind. And it's it's a passion project. It's what I always wanted to do, whatever. And I think there's just there's a humility that has to come, and if it doesn't, then you'll be humiliated. You'll either be humbled or you'll be humiliated, and hopefully just humbled, right? Where you realize, you know what? No one gives a shit about you. They just don't. All they care about is, I worked for an advertising. I worked in an advertising agency in Boston. There was this giant Irishman who scared the shit out of me, and I was writing these clever ads, and he thought it was just despicable. He thought I was wasting our clients' money by doing that. That we ought to be talking about features and benefits and so forth. So I said, okay, Tom, what do you think is great advertising? And he had just been in a New York City subway car. And I said, what do you think is a great headline? And he said, I just saw one for Preparation H, and the headline was hemorrhoids, ? And, this was appalling to me. I thought, boy, that's not very clever. He said, if you have hemorrhoids, it's damn clever. And, that's really having the humility to realize that we're not going to get anywhere until we serve people. And again, hopefully we go through a humbling. In my case, I went through also humiliation. When I was pitching things that people either didn't want, or I really didn't care if they wanted it or not. I wanted to produce television commercials. I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point, but so the market has a way of straightening us out. And I think I'm not sure it's really possible. You can even read about that. You can read, and there are lots of great books that say this precisely. But until you've been at least a little humbled, I don't know that it'll ever stick. And my principal business partner in my advertising agency, his mantra was make it about them. No matter what I would come up with, he would say, make it about them. As long as you make it about them, it's going to be fine. As long as you take you out of it, you're going to be fine. But the more you that's in it, the worse it's going to be, and the more meaningless it'll be. And we're going to stay plateaued forever.
Yeah, I remember one of my first supervisors said, Wade, sometimes you do some really, really brilliant things that help the people that we serve. And sometimes you do some brilliant things. And
I love that.
like you're clever, but it didn't help for a darn bit. So that really does. And I kind of
love that.
He waited for it to land. I was young, so it took a while for it to land. Like it's like, so you're pretty much always brilliant. Bravo. Who cares? It's when you actually serve people with it that matters.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, ouch. Yeah, I definitely went through a couple of those conversations in my career.
So I was looking into, I'm going to take a couple pieces from the book you've written, Narrow Thinking, and just a couple pieces that really stuck out for me. And one of them was the concept of, if it wasn't about money, where would you specialize? Oh. And I know that can go into the conversation of do what you love and the money will follow, which can be a dangerous conversation because you can say, well, I love, playing video games, and some people will make a lot doing that and many won't. The idea of, if it wasn't about money, where would you specialize? Yeah. How does that play out for people? And how is that, because I found that to be definitely true of what I do as I've now been an entrepreneur 20 years. I'm leaning that direction anyway. How can that help somebody look at where they're at and what they're looking to do next?
On a very, and again, it comes back to the market teaching us lessons every day. And so the reason that I ask people that question is just because it's a little bit disorienting. It's not as easy as it sounds to take money out of this conversation. It's just so completely riven into everything we do and say as entrepreneurs. And think about. So the reason I ask that question is to try to jar people a little bit and bring them back to, if what I was trying to do was to be not as a passion project, because that really is an immature adolescent thing that I did for a while. I want to make funny TV commercials because it just kicks ass to do that. And you got to get past that. But and the market will take you past it, whether you want to or not. but to more think about, what is the quality of the experience, not just for me, but more especially for the person I'm with, because I've often found that when people are really, I hate to use this expression, in the zone or whatever, um, where they're really, really helpful to other people and they lose sight of themselves, that's kind of the moment that I'm hearkening after. Um, when you're working too hard, when you're sweating too much, where you're forcing square pegs and round holes, is typically a sign that maybe this isn't the right thing, not just for you, but more especially for the people you're trying to help. And again, it goes back to the exercise of, what was the experience? What are some experience we've had in the past where everybody felt like $1 million? That's sort of what I'm after. But yeah, to take the money out of the equation is very, very hard for people to do. In fact, usually when I ask it, they look at me kind of deer in the headlights a little bit, like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about that is there's that saying, what would you do if you had $100 million in the bank, or whatever is a good number for most people, that's enough. What would you
Yeah,
do with your
yeah,
life? And some people say that's your life work. And I did that exercise a couple times. I'm like, for me, at least, that's not my life work. That's my ideal lifestyle. What I
exactly.
do as my life purpose is me getting up at 2 a.m. and feeding the baby or changing the diaper. It's not what I really want to do always,
Exactly.
but there's a different level of commitment to it. And at the risk of sounding, again, kind of going out there, there is this sort of not just altruistic, but interconnected nature to business, that if you talk to people about, whether it's Maslow's hierarchy or the old, idea of survival, success, and significance, and people are like, oh, significance is this nice, really happy place where you just give stuff away. I'm like, no, if you give stuff away and nothing comes in, that's not sustainable. That can be victimhood. But if you think of it as dependence and stages in life of a child that's dependent and then they're independent and they're like, I can do anything. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
there's actually a stage after that for those of you, and it's
yeah.
called interdependence, where you might not depend on any
Yes.
one person,
Yeah.
but you realize you're part of a community. And you'll see different nations. As somebody who's lived in different parts of the world, there are some nations that the prevailing energy is that of survival for a lot of reasons, but it perpetuates. There's,
Exactly.
and success, and very few nations, I think, that have really gotten down that true sustainable significance where there is success financially, but there's also some sort of altruism. And again, it sounds like, oh, wait, why would I do that? Because that's how you keep lifetime customers forever, that are not a pain in the butt, that love working with you, that tell their kids about you. Those are the sort of things that, to me, if someone were to say to me, how would you define, or how would you know when you have your niches, when you're having those sort of interactions with people. And it's not, oh, well, they're famous. Oh, well, they're hot. Oh, well, they're rich. Oh, they're, it really is those
Yeah.
people, wherever they're at, are bringing that back to you. And there's another question you had there, which I love. Can you raise your prices when you want to? And that being
Mhm.
a test of whether you have a business
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
Share about that a little if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, this goes back to I live in Omaha, Nebraska. And so everybody from, janitor to president of the bank, quote Warren Buffett. I mean, truly, everybody sort of knows you buy and hold. Everybody knows that, right? I mean, nationwide, everybody buys high and sells low. Not in Omaha. Everybody buys low and holds for their lifetime. I'm exaggerating, but anyway, so Buffett said, and this is Buffett's idea around pricing power, and why he buys the companies that he buys and the brands in particular in the later part of his career. Why he buys the brands that he buys is because they have pricing power, meaning they can raise prices. And so companies like Apple, for example, can raise prices, or Dairy Queen can raise prices. So the reason that I mention that also is sort of one of those that brutal market, telling us what's reality and what's fantasy. So sometimes we think we've really got it going on. Maybe making funny television commercials because I like to do that. Well, if you can't raise prices and do that, and that was the shocking, humbling reality for me, early on in my advertising career was, I was a commodity and I didn't know it. And that is a horrible, humbling feeling.
That hurts.
Because, yeah, and you find out not only can I not raise prices, in fact, I have to cut prices to get the business. The only way I can get business is by cutting the price, because it's the only thing that differentiates my product or service from your product or service. That's why niching, another reason, cold, hard market truth that we will sooner or later run into is that, if we're not differentiated and we don't have a niche and we don't solve a pain that is very painful and people really want removed, then we have no pricing power. We're just a commodity at that point. We're in effect invisible. And the only way we can sell it then is, the price per pound of whatever it is we're selling. So it's not so much it's definitely not about gouging people, having pricing power and gouging people. It's a sure sign that you're a commoditized business that means nothing to nobody if every time you raise prices, you lose all your customers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And I think there's so much to that. And definitely it's not about price gouging. I think one of the things that's happened in the coaching field that's been a little at times borderline Wild Westish is people saying, well, since I can make you 10x, I'm going to charge you 8x or 5. And it's like, whoa. They might make 10x. Some are going to make 1x. Some are going to make,
Exactly.
half x, or whatever it is.
Exactly.
But I think there's a realistic balance in there where people will still legitimately say, and not just say it once on your website and then want to retract it a year later, but they'll actually say it and keep saying it. Yes, that's a good thing. I want to shift gears to one other thing. Share a little bit, if you don't mind, about at EaseUSA, because that's one of the main reasons also. I love seeing when people, or to me, it's proof in the pudding when somebody is doing work and then they're also giving back in a way, especially when it has to do with nonprofits, not just giving money, but also doing things. Not there's anything wrong with giving money, but when the time goes there as well. Share a little bit about that, if you don't mind, and what led you to do that project.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, the organization is called at EaseUSA.org, and it's was originally developed. I started it, founded in 2007, in response to a report by then President Bush called the Report on Wounded Warriors. It was the first time I'd ever heard that term. Might have been one of the first times the term was used, and it was a report by former Secretary of Health and Human Services Shalala and former Senator Bob Dole on what happens to military when they return from, in this case, specifically from Iraq and Afghanistan. And without getting overly political, I thought Afghanistan and Iraq was a terrible idea. And so when people started to return, and with these incredible injuries, not just physical injuries, obviously, but psychological injuries, it was deeply saddening and concerning to me. But what the report on Wounded Warrior said was that of the people that return with post-traumatic stress disorder, that only a third will ever get treated for it. And by that specifically, they're saying that they'll go to the VA and take advantage of the benefits that they're entitled to. And meaning that in those days, there were something like 500,000 people a year. And obviously we've shifted gears there, but 500,000 people a year were returning, and 300,000 of them were not only not getting help at the VA, but weren't getting any help of any kind from anybody. And as a result of that, today we have a suicide every 15 minutes by military people, not just in Iraq and Afghanistan era, but also Desert Storm and Vietnam and so on. And that to me seemed to be not just a tragedy, but really a crime. And the more we dug into the reasons why, we discovered that part of it was there's a stigma, or was a stigma, and I think it's decreasing somewhat, against the VA. The idea of confidentiality was that there wasn't confidentiality, and that to admit to a psychological disorder of any kind would cap your military career. And so people didn't want to do that. There was also just sort of an inherent distrust of the VA. And there's a lot, and then there's the illness itself, which creates distrust. The nature of the illness of post-traumatic stress disorder engenders doubt, let's say, at a minimum. So anyway, so when we first got into this, at first we started by creating a clinic system that was anonymous. On the one hand, you didn't even have to give your name to get treatment. And also, unlike the VA, it was available not just to the combatant, but to the combatant's family, because the VA doesn't cover moms and girlfriends and wives and children. And what we found was that we were seeing more wives and children than we were combatants, because they're typically the head of a household with respect to health decisions. And also women are typically more open to this kind of thing. And and what ended up happening was that as the moms and daughters and wives and girlfriends and children recovered, it ultimately began to attract the combatant into it. And since then, the problem with that model is that it doesn't scale. Even if you have group therapy, it just doesn't scale. It's too expensive. And our advisors early on, our board of advisors said, this is great, but it doesn't scale. You've got to figure something out. So we did a lot of research and partnered with a psychologist at Tel Aviv University, and all of the cutting edge post-traumatic stress disorder work is being done in Israel. In part because, as this gentleman told me, half the people have PTSD, half of Israelis have PTSD. And so they came up with an incredible technology that we've since run clinical trials on that is very, very different. It's all computer driven, it's computer based treatment, and doesn't involve a therapist, except to the extent that a therapist will sort of supervise the administration of it and so forth. And yeah, very, very promising. Our clinical trials were incredibly successful, and we're rolling it out now. Not only, and this is the exciting part for me, not only to military families, but also we've done other clinical trials on women who are survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, and also on children who have civilian PTSD based mainly on child abuse. And we found it's very effective there too. So yeah, very, very exciting, very rewarding stuff. And actually that led, because we were raising a lot of money and spending a lot of money in mental health, that was what caused me to go back and get my master's degree in clinical counseling, was because I was raising money and spending money and wasn't sure what I was doing or spending it on. So I had to bone up real fast on that stuff.
Well, that's great. And I wanted to share that because that's just, to me, there's a certain point, I believe, as an entrepreneur, maybe as a person too, but where hopefully if you have experienced a certain level of success, that then you can at least pause for a second. And it takes a while to get there. And this is not to shame anybody who's not there. The survival period can be a long time.
Yes.
But hopefully you reach a point where then you can look around and say, okay, another doohickey, another doodad. No, okay, wait, actually I have time for a moment. I can pause for a moment. What else is there going on? And then the irony to that is that you meet so many other people who actually have their cups running over. And so you actually meet even more people that are doing well financially, emotionally, yes, spiritually, multidimensionally. But yeah, so thank you for doing that. That's so awesome work. That's such a big thing. And I think that's one of the, there's a couple entrepreneurs I follow that they have this sense that entrepreneurs can be the heroes of the world. And certainly we sometimes see the not so nice side of when greed gets involved or shady stuff, but certainly, whether it's, contributing to nonprofits or different things, that can be very awesome. Thank you so much for that. So, where can people find more out about your work and about even the book that you and I were talking about that relates to niching?
Absolutely. If you email me, and hopefully you can include my email address someplace, Wade, but my email address is Scott, SCOTT, at Doubledare, YOU.US. My business is Doubledare. Anyway, email me at scott@doubledareyou.us, and I'll send you a copy of Narrow Thinking, our book on taking dead aim and niche marketing. And also you can get a lot of other information, and we have a program on workplace burnout called Extinguishing Burnout. You can get a lot of information about that at our site also, assessments and treatment ideas and so forth for burnout. Again, at doubledareyou.us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that just remind people, and some people who are listening to this might say, well, wait, why did you take that right turn to talk about a nonprofit? We were, because what I found is that the entrepreneurs, especially there's a couple criteria I've been looking for more and more as I'm getting more experience as an interviewer. So I'm looking for people who've been in the game for a while, because you take some licks, you take some bruises, then you actually understand that, you know, some things are cyclical and you find out some things. And most of the people that I've interviewed that really have a great deal to offer, usually they're either already involved in something like this, something outside, something beyond themselves, or they're starting something. And again, that's just even more of a litmus test to me that somebody's not just in it to try to sell something. There's plenty of people that can talk about niching. I know that. But I really feel like you've brought something awesome to our audience today. So thank you so much for that.
My
And for
pleasure.
those of y'all
Thank you.
listening, you know, take this and just apply it and think about it. In every one of these situations, the more you're clear about who you're serving, the more you can make greater impact. You can help eventually, yes, help more people, or help the same number of people more deeply, and not just get caught up in that, well, I'm going to help 20 million people. And then, of course, make more money and do it in less time. So thanks again for listening. And as always, look forward to helping you create the life and lifestyle you desire so you can better enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks again.